And hello, everyone. Welcome to Tax Time on Monday at IBM TV. And here's Nick. We were having a little technical difficulty. Hey, I
Story of
noticed
my
somebody
life.
liked our song. What did you think of
Somebody
that,
liked our
man?
which song's
I
that?
liked it, man. I liked it. It was rather jazzy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was our first song ever together, Nick. That was our
Good.
first.
That was the one where we interviewed Neil Shapiro, who's the president of WNET, and used to be the head of NBC Nightly News. He was actually the production manager for NBC Nightly News for years.
And
So
Justin
yeah,
Laporte. You interviewed Justin Laporte.
Laporte. He was a keynote speaker, one of the keynote speakers at NAPTY this week, which was kind of interesting. It does the ratings for Nielsen Broadcasting, and as you well know, Kim, we can't figure out what our ratings are, but that's a whole nother story. It's
digital is different than broadcasting. So broadcasting goes from this radio type signal. It's, to some people it's magic, right? It goes from here to your antenna or here through your cable, and they can calculate every link in every direction. But when you're in the digital world, that just cannot happen. But I have to tell you, Nick, I think I found the song for this show because these guys are liking it. So.
Well, actually, I like Scott's introduction. I actually played it earlier today on tried to introduce it. And Shaquille has just arrived. Of course, my problem with the introductions, I've got to find them in our huge system here. But he's got a great show that's on the IBM TV network that comes on. Scott, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your tax show, since we're doing a tax show now, but you do one too.
Yeah, well, yeah, my tax show, Win the Tax Game, basically what I'm looking to do is help educate people on what they can do and maybe not do with the IRS. If they're getting audited, they're in a collection situation, maybe they're in a litigation dispute where they're involved in tax court or something else. And there are a lot of rules and a lot of ways you can win the game, but basically if you don't know what those are, you ain't gonna win.
No. And I want to add something to Scott's position here in his show. And, Scott, thank you for doing the show because I think a lot of people need it. It's very much needed. He provides to you your rights, and that's very important. But I also want to add to people, don't go it alone. Don't think that you can do this alone. Make sure you go out and you hire somebody to work with you if you're going through the situation. It's very, very important. I'm not doing it to pitch a sale. I'm doing it from experience. And, there's something to be said about not representing yourself. And then that's very, very important because someone else will have the experience, the years of experience like Scott, and the ability to think logically, because it's very hard to think logically when you're representing yourself. You're always thinking on the defensive, where somebody with experience is going to be thinking on both sides. So thank you, Scott, for giving this class.
Yeah, and I want
it's very good. It's very good. I highly recommend it.
Isn't there an old saying that a Supreme Court judge or somebody coined that said a person who wants to represent themselves has to fall for a client, something along those.
Yeah, something like that. But I'd like to bring an intro.
Same in taxes. Same in taxes, not just in court. Same in taxes.
Yeah, for those who can make it, this is Scott.
Hello, my name is Scott Estol. I'm a former IRS senior trial attorney and now a tax attorney in private practice.
A common question that I get asked as a tax attorney is, are there deductions that I can take as a sole proprietor that I can't take if I have an LLC?
Taxes are more than what you pay for clothing, shelter, and food combined every year. And yet a lot of us just think, well, it's April 15th, I paid my tax bill, filed my returns, I don't have to think about taxes again for another year. And if that's the case, you've lost the tax game. You've lost it.
That's every Friday at 2 o'clock. I certainly am starting to understand the tax game. That's a one-way street, right? We write checks to the government, and it's only this year they're starting to write checks back. So maybe it is it's a two-way street for a while, Scott. Because I thought it was very nice of them to actually write some checks back. But it's something I think everybody has to keep up with, is winning the tax game for certain.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's
absolutely. Absolutely.
that Scott made there that you said, taxes are more than what you pay for food, clothing, and shelter combined. How many families, look at the specials at the shopping centre and say, okay, well, I can't remember all your shops there. Walmart has something cheaper than Walgreens or whatever you got over there. How many people are trying to scrimp and save a few dollars here and there, but aren't paying any attention to something that like taxes, which is so much more expensive?
Well, and yeah, I think that's a great point. They're not paying any attention to it for the average person, and that's, I think, the mindset that has to stop. And until people educate themselves on, even just basic finance stuff, which I think, Nick, you were talking about, I don't know, maybe a month ago, that people can get all the way through high school and they don't even know what a checking account is, or a bank, or how a credit card company makes their money, or any of this other stuff. And so now, they're really struggling to figure out, can I afford this rent, or can I really work this mortgage in? Is it going to be less than 30% of my income, or whatever criteria is? But when you talk about taxes with them, it's just like, well, April 15th is done, I don't got to think about it. And they don't realize they're paying a lot in payroll taxes, their income taxes, their excise taxes, their taxes when they buy gasoline, when they buy alcohol, when they buy cigarettes. All these different taxes, but yet there's no plan for it. And that's the difference between American.
You're probably going to laugh at me, but I went through high school. I worked as a nanny for a while, and then got a real job, and I had no idea about taxes, so I didn't know how to plan it. And it was really weird, because when I got my first check, I go, what the heck? What is this? Because it was never taken out of my check when I was a nanny. And but I didn't know how to plan for it. Here I am in high school. Nobody taught me in high school. I actually had a class because I took a special entrepreneur type course in school. Not that it was entrepreneur, it was like DECA or something like that. And they taught you about checkbooks, and I had already learned about checkbooks. I knew how to keep a checkbook just fine. But nobody taught me about taxes in high school, Scott. And so that was the first thing. One, I didn't realize they were going to take out about a third of my check, right? And so I had to go get another job in order to fulfill my budget. So, that's the first thing. We don't teach this in school anywhere. Like, the kids are not taught that, and I didn't know about filing taxes at the year round. I ended up going to my DECA teacher and going, what do I do here? So I think it's something that we need to start teaching in school, like a regular math course, maybe in math. That here's a budget. This is how you do a budget, the basic calculating. But also your obligation to society is going to be this huge tax debt that you pay.
Well, maybe what they should do in college, high school, rather than take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Algebra 3, you should take Tax 1, Tax 2, and Tax 3, because you may or may not use algebra. You will use tax.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think that when they do that instead of algebra. Go ahead.
When they do the tax course, they may be reminded of elementary school mathematics, where they were taught that you cannot multiply something by dividing it. So you cannot multiply wealth by dividing it. It doesn't work that way.
That's right.
So I do have a question for the panel, though. I am fascinating at the atrociousness of some of the policies that we're now seeing, that Americans wholeheartedly love, obviously. So Biden wants to increase the capital gains tax rate to 40% and remove the step-up basis. So effectively, the step-up basis on businesses being passed down to future generations. So effectively, you're going to have to pay tax on unrealized capital gains. Now, look, I know I'm a crazy person who believes in, crazy ideals like freedom and liberty and those sorts of things. But there was this wee book by this wee economist called Adam Smith, and it was called The Invisible Hand. And in that book, he talked about paying off debt and what the problem was with currency controls and controls on gold and silver and that sort of stuff. And he said that you don't just trade your gold and silver to pay off debts. What you do is you trade your labor. You create something and you sell that good or service to the foreign country, right? That's how you pay off the debts. You certainly don't go around and take the factory and sell the foreign country the factory so that you can't produce anything anymore. But that's crazy talk. Obviously, Americans believe in taking the factory and just getting rid of it and getting rid of jobs and high taxes. I'm just wondering how that's going to work. What's the vision?
Well, there are over 70 million that didn't see things that way, Shaquille. I think you need to remember. And somehow there's another guy got elected. We don't know how that happened exactly, right?
But we write them off. They're all racist and transphobic and homophobic and all the other phobics. So
the Patriots are all being badmouthed right now, I understand.
So I'm not talking about the inhuman Americans that dare to have a thought for themselves. I'm talking about them. I'm talking about the majority.
Well, we're trying to keep Nick from getting kicked off YouTube, so I'm going to be careful.
I've already too late, buddy. I've already been expunged from Facebook.
Okay. Yeah.
I got a notice my Facebook site was locked. Believe it or not, it's still there. I haven't been able to figure out how to unlock it. But I've been locked out of Facebook already. But what they don't
can you message and can you?
He gets locked out all the time. Don't feel bad for him.
Oh, don't feel bad, Shaquille. Listen, Shaquille.
The kids should be getting a good, strong course in personal finance, which includes the tax, how to handle banking accounts, how to live life and navigate the business aspects of life. They should have a course on entrepreneurship,
right,
like we had mentioned before, because unless you plan on going to work for somebody at low wages the rest of your life, the only way you're going to make it is by producing goods or services that are valuable, and you can make a better living and maybe employ people and expand the economy and that kind of thing. Remember the free enterprise system. I think many people in America are wanting to forget about that on the Democratic side, but it's still alive and well, at least half of the population of the United States. And oh, by the way, Shaquille, just so you remember, we have elections in 2 more years. And so
I know, I'm aware of that. I'm well aware of that. But
we can fix the voting problems. We can get rid of the bums, right?
Well, let me ask.
That the election was stolen, which I will say I don't actually agree. I think it should be examined and it should always be reformed and always be improved.
Well, you can't say that anymore.
I don't think that there was fraud. I don't think there was fraud to that extent.
Well, there was fraud, but
not to the extent.
You can't say the election was stolen. There were tremendous irregularities. That's all you can say.
Just a second. I'm going to see how many sites are cutting us down right now. Let's see. We just got thrown out of Amazon. We got thrown out of Facebook.
I don't think there was that kind of fraud, but there should always be an examination of all government processes to make sure that they're okay. But let me rephrase the question so that I'm not being too facetious. I'm happy to be wrong, okay, and I'm wrong quite frequently. Tesla's at 1,700 times price to earning ratio. Okay, I don't understand, right? The US has a tax system that effectively subsidizes me when I'm in Vegas. When I'm in Vegas, I effectively get a tax subsidy from the US taxpayer. Why that's in the interest of the United States, I don't know, but I'm good with that. It doesn't make any sense to me, but hey, it's your money. So, or your, great-grandchildren's money. So, if you want to give it to me, I'm all for it. Now, I'm just wondering, though, in relation to increasing the capital gains tax to 40%.
Yeah, that's hurting.
And in places like Washington, D.C., where it's going to be 50%. What's the logic underpinning this? What's the theory? By having less money, we're better off, or what's the idea here?
Okay, I can tell you. And by the way, that's hurting me. So you're killing me even saying that, Shaquille. Okay, but let me give you an idea. I start IBM TV, right? Okay, it grows, and of course, as it grows, I don't have to pay any taxes on it. It gets to a large multiple. I sell out. I pay less taxes than if it was ordinary income. Now, unfortunately, that is my plan. So you're killing me because I like the idea of
I'm
having.
not killing you. The Democrats that you
Okay,
voted
the Democrats are killing me
Well,
because
you voted for him, Nick.
yeah, that's
Proud of
true.
that
That's
you
true.
voted for him.
That's true. But see, it's against it's against my financial interest. They weren't supposed to do that because they're supposed to allow people to grow companies, sell companies with minimal capital gains tax.
Nicholas,
However,
we spent all of last year, and especially in the lead up to the election, talking about Biden's policies, and you were all for them. This was exactly.
No. The thing is, you don't understand. I don't mind them taxing you, Shaquille, but they can't get to you because you're in Australia.
Tax me, I'm American.
Yeah, I know. We need
That's why Americans are so dumbfounded when I come over and go, "This is an amazing country."
No.
They're all like, "What? What are you talking about?"
No, we need more people like you to come to the United States so we can tax you, but they don't get that yet. See, I don't run tax policy in the United States. But if I did, I'd say, Shaquille, welcome, come to United States so we can tax you on your worldwide income.
I come from a wealthy Western country, so you don't actually want me. You guys want the poor, the undocumented, the uneducated, the sick.
I already told you.
You're poor and you're sick,
Okay. You know how they're tearing down. Well, they're tearing down these Confederate statutes. They should tear down that Statute of Liberty. It says the wrong thing. It says, give me your poor, your hungry. No. It should say, give me your best, your brightest, your wealthiest people. You're welcome.
America doesn't go for that sort of stuff. And you can't tear down the Statute of Liberty. Send it back to France. I don't think America deserves it anymore.
No, I would send it back
because the idea of having a statue given to you by France to represent your liberty and freedom, right. And then some genius has decided to put a no smoking sign on the Statue of Liberty. You go to the island and there's a sign on the statue representing your freedom and liberty telling you what you can't do. I mean, you could put it next to the statue, but actually on the Statue of Liberty, she must be trying.
You know what? We have such a big national debt here. Maybe we should just sell the Statue of Liberty. I mean, the thing is, we should put it for auction, help it used to pay the national debt, and get rid of it because it represents things that America shouldn't be even looking at right now. We can't afford the poor, the hungry, the starving anymore. We need the rich, the well-off, and other countries. Because I look to say, well, maybe I should do like you, Shaquille, move to another country. But they want is people that bring in money. To get the citizenship. You basically bring in employees, make donations, We should have that same policy. You're welcome here. As long as you pay.
Look, I would happily do business with the United States. I'd happily come in on a treaty trader visa. There's no way in hell I would take an American citizenship or an American passport. Thank you very much, but I'm good. Thank you. But I will say, if you do want to, sell part of the country, you should sell California to the Californians. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Someone fact check me. Is 36% of the population that's on Social Security benefits in California?
I don't know, but the thing is, we'd have to fact check that to find out. But there are quite a few people that are on benefits in California. There was a whole article in the New York Times about people leaving, and I've experienced in my practice. They're leaving San Francisco because they don't need they don't need the high taxes, the high rent, the congestion. Honestly,
the idea that California has is our middle class is leaving,
right,
because of high taxes and high regulations.
Yep.
We are or should be the wealthiest state in the union. We have the greatest abundance of agricultural wealth and mining wealth and everything else. We've got Silicon Valley. We've got all this stuff, and people are leaving, including the tech companies, are leaving California.
Even Elon Musk. Yep.
Elon Musk, absolutely. So what we need is more taxes and more regulation.
Yes.
That's the theory. It's a bit like socialism. We know that we've had generations of people that grew up in these atrocious, terrible circumstances. There was death and destruction and miserable lives for so many people. We had several wars over it, and we came out the other end and said freedom is so fantastic, and now what we need is more socialism.
Right.
So I find this illogical, but I'm sure there is some rational reasoning behind this. Please, somebody help me out here.
Well, the thing is, actually, they've helped out a lot because they're migrating to Texas, Utah, and other states. Not so much my home state of North Carolina, but they are leaving California, and they're taking their tech businesses with them outside of California, mainly because of what you just described: the taxes, the high cost of real estate, the high cost of living, the congestion in the cities. Frankly, honestly, Shaquille, I thought they would have done that a long time ago, because when we first built our business in Seattle, we left Seattle because of all those reasons. Seattle, not the income tax.
The big issue is that they're then going into places like Texas.
Sure.
And they're voting for Democrat policy in Texas. They don't seem to be drawing the connection.
Yeah.
I don't. As I said, I actually do try to understand the other side of every argument. I do, and I do actually get the appeal of socialism to a lot of people. I think that it's mostly born off people feeling as though they don't have enough and they can't get ahead and they're not living the same life as previous generations. I get it. What I don't understand is when you know something doesn't work, why you keep going with it. Yeah. So if you know that high taxes don't work, if you know that taxes that are put out there for the purposes of being confiscatory, and then you're actually saying, look, we're not taking this to fund, the things that we need. We're just taking it because you've got too much, and we're just going to redistribute it to other people. Yeah. But we know that that doesn't work because it never has. And when you do it and it still doesn't work, why would you double down on that? I mean, I saw a report the other day where that homeless person in California killed somebody or whatever, and they've put in toilets there, and they're costing $300,000 a year for these toilets. So they've got a security guard out the front, and they're going to put showers in, another $500,000. California apparently spends per capita $80,000 per year per homeless person. Okay, this is not a money issue. This is a leadership issue. This is a governance issue. And I just find it fascinating that the idea is, well, these people are homeless. We should increase taxes without paying any attention to how the social services are actually being administered, without paying any attention to how bureaucracy is actually doing things. I recently saw on Netflix the trials of Gabriel Fernandez. You know, that was an absolute disaster for the Department of Children's Services, or whatever they're called in California. And again, I would suggest that we need to pay attention all over the world to what our government agencies are actually doing, and not just blame the plight of society on the wealthy.
Yeah, but is this beat up on California Day?
Take the fun out of it, Jack.
No, it's a beat up on Government Day, and it always is a beat up on Government Day.
Oh, it's always a beat up on Government Day.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
So, a couple of things on that.
Go ahead.
On Shaquille's tax points, I think I think it's pretty well said. I mean, that the tax policy is always sort of a redistribution of wealth, right? Where do we want this money to go? And you've looked at you've seen these huge increases in the national deficit in the United States, right? You had a $7 trillion deficit under Trump, right? You had all these deficits under Bush, under Obama. We've had this huge history of, over the last couple decades of massive deficits where, we can cut the taxes, but the spending just keeps going up. And, I think if you look at the Biden tax plan, a few things come out. One, Shaquille, you're right about the investments, the capital gains there. I mean, the capital gains right now are taxed at 37%, and they're going to go up to 39.6%. That's on the short-term side. And where Biden's really, I think, reaching is going to be on the long-term side, where right now maximum rate is 23.8. And for people that make more than $1 million, that number is going to go to ordinary income rates. And so what is that going to do? Well, if you're under $1 million of income, great. I guess nothing's going to really change. But if your income is more than that, and considering that the income is on an annual basis, so maybe you are maybe you make a couple $100K a year, but 1 year you sell a couple rental properties, or like Nick said, you have a big stock sale or something like that. There's still ways to plan for it, but the bottom line is that if you're making more than $1 million a year, you're going to pay more under the Biden tax plan. And I don't know if he's going to be able to get that through Congress. I don't know if the Senate's going to back him on that or not. But that's really what we're looking at.
But they have bicameral majority.
They need to communicate. They need to communicate. Go ahead.
They have bicameral majority in Congress, Scott. But, you know, but I think more to my point, really, without being facetious about it, I actually wouldn't, at the moment, and for a number of years in the past, I wouldn't actually want to become an American citizen. I love America, but I'm a citizen of other countries, and I'm quite happy where I am. Now, unless I fell in love and was going to set a family up there, why would I go there? And that's the same with Canada or any other country. But let's say that I did want to move to North America. Almost every country on earth has a capital gains tax rate that's around 50% off its maximum marginal rate of tax. And, you know, we've got to talk about international tax competitiveness. If you were looking at setting up a business in North America, and let's exclude Mexico, let's just talk about the United States and Canada. Canada's not exactly a low tax environment, but why would you choose to set up the business in, you know, Washington State instead of in Vancouver? Why would you choose to set up the business in upstate New York instead of in Prince Edward Island in Canada, when you're going to get a more preferential tax treatment and you're still going to have access to the US markets? I mean, that's a big problem. You look at Europe, including Scandinavian countries in Europe. Everyone talks about their high tax rates, but that's on income. Capital gains is a little bit lower. They have other exceptions. The corporate rate of tax is at 20%, and you can see the European countries competing on those tax rates. You actually have a look at a much broader tax base across all the countries in Europe. You see that in New Zealand and Australia. You even see that to a degree in Canada. But yet in the United States, they're going to sit there and say, well, you know, what we need is a tax rate that is the highest in the world, that's uncompetitive. We have the highest levels of debt. And if you come here, if you come to our country and you become a citizen, not only are we going to tax you on, or just a green card holder, not only are we going to tax you on what you generate from the United States, we're going to tax you on everything else that you earn outside the United States. So if I'm an international person and I'm very wealthy and very well educated and very successful, Nick, the kind of people you say you're trying to attract in the United States,
right,
I would have to give up half of everything else that I've earned prior to coming to the United States in order to come to the US. So in other words, what I'm going to do is everything in my power to prevent myself from ever getting a green card. I'm going to want to come in under a treaty visa, a treaty trader visa, or some other kind of visa that allows me to come in and out of the United States and do business with the US without being taxable there. In other words, you're not going to get the benefit of my everyday expenditure for at least half the year, because I'm going to want to spend less than 183 days of the year in your country. Mm-hmm. How is that positive for the US? To me, a more positive thing would be to be internationally competitive, to have a more simplified tax system and a fairer tax system that's broad-based. Even if it means I've got to pay a bit more, let's have a broad-based tax system that is fair on everybody. And that's not happening. I think that's going to be really bad. And also, just very quickly, Scott, one of the reasons for the discount on capital gains is to take into account long-term capital gains versus inflation. You have to factor that in. Back to you, Scott.
No, absolutely. And you know, and I think when you start putting these higher tax rates up on long-term capital gains, like when Hillary Clinton was running, she wanted to tax long-term capital gains. You had to hold them 5 years instead of 1. I mean, and all these different permutations. And the whole point of having a long-term capital gains rate that is significantly lower, say by half almost now in the U.S., is to encourage long-term investment and to eliminate a lot of the problems that, Shaquille, you're pointing out. I mean, it's absolutely insane, I think, for the U.S. to be raising capital gains tax rates like to that extent. You know, and I think the other thing is, you know, we're looking, you know, at the California situation with a lot of companies leaving and everything. And, you know, I live a couple blocks from Coors Field in Denver. Colorado is a huge recipient, like Texas, like Utah, like other states, of a lot of this exodus of California business. And the tech center by University of Colorado and Colorado State is huge. And why is that? Because we have a 4.6% maximum tax rate. We don't have all these regulations. And so you are seeing that. And why would somebody in your position, Shaquille, come to the United States and subject yourself to this huge tax rate or regulations or everything? I mean, you'd have to be, well, I'm not going to say it. You'd have to be pretty stupid, let's just put it that way, to want to do that. And obviously,
the ultimate unfairness, I think, to the everyday American. Look, I say a similar thing here in Australia. The ultimate unfairness to the everyday American is this. If I happen to live in a different country, perhaps with a very low capital gains tax, or even a country that exempts foreign income and foreign earnings, when you have a higher rate of capital gains, what it tends to do is it tends to drive up prices of some assets and drive down prices of others. If I'm an international investor, I'm going to invest in real estate, because what's going to happen is when I go to sell, I'm not subject to tax in the United States because I'm an alien, right? I'm a non-resident investor. So the taxes that an American would have to pay puts them at a disadvantage in comparison to me as an international investor. Okay. But yet I get all that money, that all those American dollars come into my bank account into another country, and America loses that. That increased capital gains tax has hurt Americans and favored international investors, so that the American economy is not working for Americans, but it's working better for people who are not Americans. This is absurd. This is absolutely ridiculous. Now, look, as an international investor, I should just go, hey, yeah, guys, that's fantastic. Yeah, keep doing that. But I'm not going to do that, because I actually do happen to care deeply about your country, and I love your country, and I really don't understand the thinking here. I just don't get it. It's the same thing with what I said in Vegas. Because Vegas taxes you guys on your winnings, but they don't tax certain residents of certain countries on their winnings, because of the way the rebates work at the casino, you end up getting effectively a tax subsidized, an American taxpayer subsidized holiday to Vegas. That's why I always go to Vegas when I'm there. Not just for that reason, but I also enjoy the place.
You go there to donate. We appreciate your donations.
Well, I've never lost in Vegas, but that's not the point. No, I've never lost there. But this is just insanity. If you're going to favor anybody, why wouldn't you favor your own citizens before you favor other citizens? This doesn't make any sense.
Well, part of it, I think, is that we don't recognize other countries as part of our international economy.
Except for Greenland, because you wanted to buy that.
And places like Australia, I think, is a foreign country and foreign to us. Now, Terry Rushton has just joined us from National Pension Partners in Salt Lake. Terry, have you ever been to Australia?
I have never been physically to Australia, no.
Okay.
I'm actually British, by the way, as well.
Dan, have you ever been to Australia? Dan Worthington?
You know, regrettably, I haven't been there to visit Shaquille yet. I hope to once this.
Okay, Scott, have you ever been to Australia?
I don't live in Australia.
I know, but you're in Australia, right?
Right. I know you don't live in Australia. Right.
Scott, have you ever been to Australia?
I have. I've been to Sydney, Melbourne, Tasmania, up the Gold Coast. I love it. Australia to me is, my favorite country, to be quite honest. If I was going to pick some other place to live, I'd move to Sydney tomorrow.
Well, it wasn't Shaquille's favorite because they don't have a Bill of Rights in Australia. So I think he's migrated over to Switzerland, although we're trying to talk him into Liechtenstein, but that's not working. We're actually going to have the Prince of Liechtenstein on the IBM TV network in 2 weeks. He's going to be on our show called Swiss Impact, which is before your show, Scott, on Friday. So we're going to try to get Shaquille to talk to the Prince of Liechtenstein so he can talk him into why he would want to go to Liechtenstein as opposed to Switzerland. But Shaquille,
no, I'm not going to upset. I'm not going to upset the Prince, and I'm quite well known for upsetting royalty when I'm in Europe. I'm not going to upset the Prince of the country that actually has my fund registered in it and my financial.
Your fund is registered.
I'll behave.
Are you an Anstalt or you're a Stiftung, or what type of registry do you have? Anstalt or Stiftung?
I'm not telling you anything.
Okay, now you tell me. Okay, I don't need to know. I don't need to know. But what you're saying is something very important. The United States doesn't compete internationally for taxes or frankly anything, because we are the United States of America. We are the world's largest economy. So frankly, we don't even care.
But that's the thing is, you did care once. You know,
Well, the thing is, what we have to do is start changing the attitude of people in the United States to understand that we are in an international world. We are in an international economy. We do have to compete even tax-wise, or people will move their companies, they'll move themselves to different jurisdictions because they're better off. As a matter of fact, one of our commentators said that, hey, you want to be IBM TV, you need to move your company over to Switzerland or over to Liechtenstein or some other place, Ireland, which is a less taxing jurisdiction. Google did that. Facebook, Microsoft, they all have subsidiaries overseas. So since people may not migrate, they may move their companies overseas to take advantage of these lower tax rates. And we're seeing this now in the US.
If you have companies overseas, you also have employees in those overseas companies. I mean, let's look at New York. You know, what's so special about New York? What makes New York, geographically I'm talking about, what makes New York some great place? Well, like most other, you know, great economic powerhouse places, they've got a great port and they have a great geographic location. So New York was a great trading center of the world. And I'm not talking about financial trading, you know, going back in time. They were a great trading port. You know, somewhat the same in Texas with their proximity to South America and the Caribbean islands, and to a lesser degree, LA. But you certainly saw in New York, and that was the closest proximity to Europe, and you also saw the same thing in Pennsylvania, but more so in New York, was all the trading and all the ports, and so all that trade that could occur through there. You know, you look at the Middle East, you look at places in the Middle East, people think that all their wealth comes from oil. But you look back through history, that what made the Middle East very wealthy pre-oil was the fact that they were on those trading routes, those trading lines. So if you're going to make yourself deliberately uncompetitive, and not for any particular reason, not because you think that's going to help you, but just because, you know, I don't know, I don't even know what the reason is to want to be uncompetitive. If you're going to do that, that's going to have long-term detrimental effects. You've already got a $30 trillion debt, or close to it. You've got $150 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So we're talking $200 trillion. The world's money supply is currently $350 trillion. I don't know. I'm just positive that could be a problem. Obviously, there's enough assets in America. But, you know, this just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, if these sorts of things work so well, if these are the real ways to enrich a country, why isn't that foreign policy for the United States? Why didn't the United States, when it went to war with Iraq and Afghanistan, and then help Afghanistan and Iraq to form their own parliaments and all those sorts of things, why didn't the United States and its allies say, look, please don't have freedom. Please don't have free market economic theory, because that obviously doesn't work according to America. What we think you should have is a 90% tax rate. Why wasn't that the recommendation to Iraq? Why was that not the recommendation to Germany after World War II or any other you know, conflict the United States has been in? Clearly it doesn't work. You don't recommend it to any other country. So what is this, like self-flagellation or something? Like, what is going on?
You know, the irony of all this, Shaquille, is that Trump's American First platform was really good for everyone and good for the environment. I mean, when you look at all the statistics during the 4 years that he was president, greenhouse gases were reduced, jobs were up, manufacturing was up, businesses started coming back to the United States. There were incentives for success, that kind of thing. Now, the international players, the politicians particularly, didn't like him because he wasn't a member of the club and he wasn't a globalist. But I would contend he did more good for the people of the world in general because he did good for the United States than the policies that Biden is now introducing in the United States, which are going to be very, very harmful, very hobbling to our economy, very destructive to our people, and very disincentivizing to the free market system. And so, you know, it's, although Trump is, and oh, by the way, he's going to get us into more wars. Trump was getting us out of all the wars. Trump was able to broker more peace deals in the Middle East than any prior president because he's getting everybody out of wars and he's going for to show people their common interest and building common ground. Those are all going to go to the right-hand side under a Biden administration because of them placating and paying Iran and the Soviets and everybody else. Gosh, I don't understand it. It is absolutely insane. Not to say anything that gets you kicked off YouTube, Nick.
I personally believe that Trump was more protectionist than I would have liked to see from a US president. However, I don't have a problem with people, with a president or a country's leader saying, look, if you want to do business with us, we want it to be mutually beneficial. So yes, you get an advantage here. What gives us an advantage? How do we benefit? I think that that's reasonable. But let's talk about China for a moment. I've actually said this a number of times. I've said this to Holmes, who does a lot of business with China. I've actually got nothing against China. I really don't. The people that live there deserve to, have the best life that they can have. What I see as being the biggest issue with China and why China accumulates such a massive amount of Western debt is because where can they spend their money? They get US dollars and they can't spend it because Americans aren't selling them anything. They get Australian dollars and they can't spend it because Australians aren't really selling them as much as what we're buying from them. Now, in our case, yes, we sell them iron ore, we sell them wine, we sell them beef. We do sell them things. But, an argument I have here in Australia is that we have a shortage very frequently in most of our grocery stores on toddler and baby formula, milk powder formula. And the reason why is because a lot of predominantly Chinese people come in and buy it and they ship it back home. Now, this has been going on for years. It makes absolutely no sense to me at all why our government hasn't gone, we're going to build some new milk processing plants so that we can cater to the demand. The demand's there. Why don't we sell more to them? That's what they want. They want this stuff and we're not doing it, which is a ridiculous thing for Australia. And I say the same thing to the United States. There are certain things that the United States excels at producing and manufacturing, but you guys are not doing it and then exporting it to the rest of the world. Again, but so high, and why would you not want to produce stuff? In the meantime, you've got people who are unemployed, and you're worried about the minimum wage. If you look at the minimum wage in most of Europe, nobody's on the minimum wage. Everybody's on a much higher rate than that. The minimum wage in the United States wouldn't even be an issue if your economy was productive and exporting goods to other countries. You wouldn't care what the minimum wage is. The minimum wage is $15 an hour. Who cares? Everyone's on $25 and $30 an hour.
Yeah, but since no one cares, well, we just make it $15 an hour and index.
Because right now your economy doesn't support it. Right now, countries like Australia, who is a very close ally of the United States, has fought in every single war since our federation that you guys have ever had, except for that. Okay, we're a strong ally, and we love American cars, but we don't buy any because you guys won't make them to sell it to us. You won't make cars that comply with international standards. How hard is it? You've got millions of people unemployed in Detroit, in rural Georgia, in rural parts of the southern states, just to name a few. Okay, there is absolutely the capacity to build things to the specifications of other countries and sell it to them. And it's a lot cheaper for us to have things manufactured in the United States than it is here, but we can't get them. So where do we buy our cars from? We buy our cars from Asia, we buy our cars from Europe. And I can tell you now that the cost of manufacturing in Europe is not exactly cheaper than what it would be in the United States. So what gives?
Well, I guess what you're explaining to me is the failure of the capitalistic system, that Adam Smith's hand isn't going to go in and fix this, right?
No, not at all. The capitalist system would fix this like that.
Well, why didn't it fix it?
If America was a free market capitalist country, okay, or at least a little bit more free market, lower regulation, you'd have people like me that would come in and say, you know what, I'm going to manufacture this in the United States and ship it to Australia. I'm going to manufacture this in Canada and ship it to New Zealand. That's what I would do. I would set up those trade, and people like me would set up those trade routes and set up those sort of exporting things. But instead of that, you have such an enormous hurdle and barrier to entry because of regulation, not because of money, because of regulation and high taxes, that it prevents and curtails trade. And this is a problem for the United States. And the thing is, if it's a problem for the United States, it's going to become a problem for Europe, and it's going to become a problem for countries like Australia and New Zealand, because if the things that we hold dear, the ideals that we hold dear, freedom, liberty, the right to vote, the right to education, the right to express your opinion, all of those things, if that isn't represented in its strongest terms by the United States, Where is it going to be represented?
China?
Oh, yeah, China.
No, not China. But the thing is, you're actually putting out some very good points, and that might be the reason Tesla is trading today up 4% right now, as I just checked, and Tesla is trading at 1,300 price earnings ratio. It went down, but it
come down
because the price of the stock keeps going up. But maybe it's because Elon Musk had the audacity to say that he's going to produce cars all over the world, and he's actually going out and doing that. And from our last note, Elon Musk lives in the United States of America. So, Shaquille, why didn't Elon Musk abandon the United States and run over to Switzerland like some other of our compatriots do and say, I'm going to manufacture cars in Switzerland? Why did he choose the United States of America?
It might have something to do with the fact he's American. Oh, just putting it out.
Could be it, but he could still
getting subsidies too from the government.
Oh, he's getting subsidies from the government. So the thing is, here we have a government of the United States that's subsidizing him, and these same people that government subsidies don't want to pay any taxes. Do we have a little bit of a problem like that?
I'm not getting any government subsidies, and I won't name the state or the few states involved. But when I was in the United States last time, and I discussed the potential of setting up factories in the United States and taking over factories that were closed, a number of the states were very competitive and offered me some amazing deals in relation to government subsidies. Now, my personal opinion is if your business can't survive, as a general rule, without government subsidies, you shouldn't be in business, and you should either work out how to increase your profitability or how to have a business that runs without needing the subsidy. Now, I understand that in times of emergencies and time of real need, when there's floods or there's been some sort of event, that the government, of course, will step in to help. Okay. But the idea that you need a government subsidy, that you're a rent seeker, I think Scott mentioned this last time, a rent seeker essentially, this is appalling. And this is not free market capitalism. This is crony capitalism. This means that the people with the most amount of money to lobby government get the subsidies whilst the rest of the society suffers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the thing is, that's been our system for quite some time. And a lot of the corporations that do well, and a lot of that big $1.9 trillion package is not meant for the average American. I think 360.
It's not meant for the Americans at all, is it?
Well, 360 billion of it is going to go to just individual people. The rest of it goes to corporate America. So either in terms of loans or grants.
And it's not meant for Americans at all, clearly, because even with the massive increase in the money supply that pushed up the markets and pushed up real estate prices during the pandemic, the majority of the US stock market is owned by people outside the United States. So how are people today, young people today, going to explain to their great-grandchildren and say, look, the reason you're still paying off this debt is not because our generation benefited from it, but because we decided it'd be a really good idea to indebt you and your children so that we could allow foreign investors to make money from our companies, so that people who own shares in all these big companies that get government subsidies and don't pay any tax, those people, when they realize their capital gains, aren't being taxed in the United States either. You are subsidizing the lifestyles of the rich and famous outside of the United States and then blaming the wealthy of the US for it. It's craziness.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you on that. The thing is, we do have to change our policies more toward a tax fair system for the United States, the people in the United States. Unfortunately, what you and I think is not what's the thought of Washington, D.C. right now. And I think Scott
should make me the president.
And Scott even did a presentation, did you not, Scott, on the Biden tax policy? Scott, could you tell us a little bit about the Biden tax policy so we know what's going to be coming down the chute pretty shortly?
Yeah, I just did one a couple days ago, actually, and you're going to see, I think, higher tax rates for anybody that makes more than $400,000 a year. You're going to see higher capital gains rates. Probably going to see an increase in the corporate income tax rate, 21% now. I don't know, probably, and Biden says 28%. I don't know if it'll go quite there, but kind of what Shaquille was saying, though, as far as a lot of this goes, I mean, the United States seems to be, the policy seems to be either let's just cut taxes quite a bit, like the Trump administration. And I would disagree with Dan. I found his administration to be just horrific in an economic way as well. But I would also not go with the Biden tax plan just because of the tax increases. But when you start looking at the Democratic policies, typically over the years, it seems like if you raise taxes and you keep raising taxes, you'll keep making more money, right? And so if the tax rate is 30%, we'll make $30. If it's 40%, we'll make 40. And so the higher you go, the more money you make. And obviously not realizing that at some point it becomes a law of diminishing returns. And so trying to figure out where that is, I think, has been a real major problem for the U.S. economy and for U.S. tax system, because you don't really know, we don't really have a consistent policy. Like Dan was saying, you've got, remember, you got elections in 2 years, right? And he's every 2 years, we potentially could have a major change in tax policy depending on who's in the House and who's in the Senate. And, we have a 50-50 split in the Senate, and then ties will go to the Democrats, but I'm not sure the Democrats are going to get 50 votes if you start seeing tax increases going real high. I think you're going to have at least a couple of them that are going to hold out, and I don't know if any Republicans are going to break. So I think, the policy of the U.S. in the next couple of years is going to be in a state of flux, other than they ain't going down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I would almost suggest that it would be in the interest of the United States to have, almost a referendum and say, what is it that you want? Do you want high tax rates just for the sake of having them at the expense of international competitiveness and jobs, or do you want a system that's fairer and et cetera, et cetera? Let the American people decide, because the thing that you want to get away from, of course, if it's bad policy, you have to change it. But, what we've seen, again, from the international community, what we've seen is Obama made a lot of changes internationally, but he also made a lot of changes to the way things were in America. That's fine. Trump came in and undid a lot of them. Now you've seen Biden come in, he's had 40 executive orders in the first 10 days, and he's changed everything once again. And I think that, people do pay attention to political stability. And as much as you think it's not stable in America, it is. You haven't actually had a civil war or anything like that. So it's a stable country. You do have a system of laws and governance and all of that sort of thing. But when they change so dramatically, so frequently, and you're right, the House, the midterm elections come up in 2 years. If we're looking at 2 years, look, most businesses fail in the first 3 to 5 years. So, the idea of wanting to come into an environment and not know where you're going to stand tomorrow, that's a problem. And again, all of these things conspire to make the United States at the moment a less competitive country. And I think that's a problem. I really do.
That's a huge problem. I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head right there. And I think the one other thing that we're looking at, I think, too, is that, the Republican Party that came in 4 years ago went very, very far right. And it sounds like the Democratic Party that's coming in now is going to go very far left. And you don't see a whole lot of centrist policies anymore. And I think that's making things really difficult, because how do you advise even a U.S. client, on we're going to set up a business now, but we can't even tell you what the tax laws are going to be 2 years into your business. We don't really know. And if history's any repeat, the Republican Party will take the House. Who knows about the Senate? And with a Democratic president, we're not going to have any legislation, or maybe we will, or more $1.9 trillion stimulus bills. I mean, what really is going on? And so how is this, as somebody that's a foreign investor, how do you even look at that? Where, as Americans, and somebody like myself who has a fairly good reading on the tax law, I don't really have a clue what's going on.
Well, then we'll
from my perspective, from the perspective of my business partners, we don't. So in 2018 and 19, when I was there, and in previous years, even under Obama when I was there was a great desire and to do business with the United States. And I looked at the United States and said, wow, there is so much opportunity here. If there was ever a country that I would say, just drop me off with $100 in my pocket, I know nobody and I'll make it, it'd be the United States. That's how I felt a few years ago. Since probably 2018, 2019, I was still very interested in doing something in the United States, but I started to learn a lot more about the US and see how many hurdles there were. And more recently, I have to say that I would look at other countries. I do look at Canada. I look at Canada a lot. I've got family in Canada. I have family in the United States. But I do look at Canada. I do look at the UK. I do look at all sorts of different places because I'm international enough to be able to do business anywhere I want. I would prefer to do things in the United States, but if I don't know where I'm going to stand and how to plan out my business, why would I do it?
A good question. Terry, since you're a CPA, how do you do planning with a dysfunctional government, or do you even look at that, Terry?
You're muted, Terry.
I do not have enough insight into these high levels of tax planning and financial analysis enough to begin to answer the questions and the problems that the United States economy has. And so as a little guy sitting out here in the boondocks, all I can do is just assume that the future is going to be some variation of what the past was, and do my best to stay a little bit flexible and plan for the worst and hope for the best, and try to make adjustments as you go along.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because it seems to me that what we're seeing is a problem in stability in the United States, because how do you plan now, from what I understand, the retirement area that we work in, that the bill that was just passed, the Secure Act, during the Trump administration was bipartisan. It was actually something like 73-21 in the Senate. Very favorable, so we know that the retirement planning area will probably be around as it is today. But these other areas, in other words, your marginal tax rates, your taxes in general, at least according to Scott, looks like we don't know what it's going to be. In other words, it could be very volatile. We could see a huge increase in the marginal tax rates on a going forward basis. When you say that that's what we're looking at, Scott, and then maybe 2 years from now, it may change again?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're looking at here as far as trying to figure out what to do. But I think if you go back to if we go back 4 years to where when Trump just came in, Republican House, Republican Senate, and Trump ran, one of his big policies was on tax reduction. That was a big part of his plan. And right away, he went into it. They got the negotiations, and they barely got that bill passed until the very end of the year. And so what happened? That tax bill was effective in 2018, and they did a great job getting it through. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Very complicated legislation. But the reason it took so long is that it kept bouncing from committee in the House to the Senate. They were trying to do all these reconciliations and everything else. And so I put that into today's situation and say, all right, even if the Democrats are as organized as the Republicans were, they're not going to get a tax bill, at least a major tax bill, through to the end of the year. So I'm pretty comfortable in thinking that the taxes in 2021 are going to be where they are now. 2022, I don't know. So, tax planning, if you're going to sell assets, you're going to incur capital gains, do it in 21, not 22. If you're going to, if you've got a way to shift income where you can accelerate income into 21 or delay expenses into 22. So, there's that type of planning, but we're talking about planning for, 21 and 22. And I think Shaquille's point is that's all great, right? We can probably plan for the next 2 years, but I'm not planning on being in business for a year or two, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about the next 10 years? And where's the U.S. going there?
And with that, we're at the hour, so I'd like to thank everybody for watching Tax Time and also winning the tax game. Make sure you don't miss that. That's Friday on the IBM TV network. We'll see you next week on Tax Time.